What's up guys, Manny from Motomillion. It's time to get the Ultra Gold ready for the road. Well, I don't know if you could tell or if you watched our previous episodes, this Ultra Gold is not ready for the road because it's missing a chain and also a front sprocket. On the previous episodes, we did our front wheel and our rear wheel with the lightweight forged core motor wheels, and we did some other upgrades like the rear underslung caliper setup. We set up some of the carbon fiber stuff, and also our rear sprocket is ready to go. But today we're going to put our chain on. Next time you see this bike, it's probably going to be a ride comparison between a Tuono V4 and an RS V4. Till then, less talking, more working. Let me get that chain and sprocket on there. We'll do some measurements to see what we've said in terms of weight. And also, I'll talk to you guys about the setup of the wheelbase of the bike, because you could do that with a chain and also a chain adjuster like this. And we'll talk about the effects on it on your riding style and on your motorcycle. Well, it's time for our chain, and we're going to use an EK3D black and gold chain. It matches the Ultra Gold theme of this bike, at least in my mind it does, because I haven't had it on the bike yet. And you guys were asking us, why do we use the ID ERV7 chains on some episodes for our builds, and sometimes we use the EK3D. So it's a personal preference. Both are great chains. The DID ERV7 is just a tad bit lighter than the EK3D chains, and I actually like the gold color of the DID ERV7 chain more, but EK3D's black and gold is a classic now, and it's going to look great on the bike. Don't mind the grease on the packaging, but it'll be nice and clean when we put it on the bike. And you decide, and you let us know if you like the look or not. But till then, let me get this on the bike. We got to measure how many links of chains we need, and then we'll measure the stock stuff versus what we're replacing it, just to see what we're saving in weight. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're saving 2 to 3 pounds off the driveline on this bike with this chain conversion, because we're also doing a 520 conversion on the bike while we did the wheels. The bike comes with a 525. Let me get this on there, pull the scales out, and then we'll find out how much weight we saved. It's measurement time, guys. The scale never lies. 43 tooth sprocket for the rear, 42 tooth sprocket stock, 525. This is kind of not fair because this is a 43 tooth. The bike has a 42. I have a 43 here because a lot of you guys like to put a 43 tooth sprocket on these bikes. I read the forums and the Facebook groups, and I'm going to address that because you guys say that this bike becomes more alive with a 43 tooth rear sprocket rather than a 42. But let's measure it. Just like the wheels, I forgot to measure that sprocket before I put it on. But let's do this. This is as fair as it's going to get. So we're playing handicap with what we put on the bike, so none of you guys complain. Not that you do, but some of you do. So stock sprocket, let's start it and check it. It's 1.58 pounds for the stock rear sprocket. And then I'm going to swap around. Let's put the super light rear sprocket that we ran. It's 1.52 pounds. So it's not a huge deal of weight savings with the rear sprocket, 0.6 pounds. Maybe with the 42 tooth it'll be 0.1 pound. Let's try the front sprockets. This is the stock front sprocket. It's 0.58 pounds. And I'm removing that and putting the 520 conversion front sprocket, which is 0.44 pounds. So 0.8, 0.6, so that's already 0.14 pounds saved. You're probably wondering what that orange stuff is on that front sprocket. And if you're wondering, you're probably new to the channel. And if you're not even new to the channel and you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It really, really helps us with the algorithm of YouTube so that we can create more content like this for you, because our view count goes up. We get very happy with it. In return, we'll make lots and lots of cool videos if you think it's cool. But getting back to this, so the front sprocket is torqued down, and Aprilia's service manual calls for a thread lock on there. We put our red Loctite on there. So this orange stuff is called thread checker, and it's like a paste that goes on and it dries hard. If that sprocket bolt is to ever loosen, it'll get a nice little crack in it. We'll know that it's loosening so that we could pay attention to it. And also on this bike, we're running our Rizoma front sprocket cover, so that's going to be nice and visible so that we could incorporate it as a part of our pre-ride checks to check that, or if not, it's once in a while. I'm not going to probably check it every single time, but I would check it every couple times before I take it for a ride. Now that we know what that is, let me get the chain on, let's cut it to length, maybe remeasure it, to see what it weighs compared to the stock stuff, and then we'll button it all back together. Because as I said, I'm going to talk about the wheelbase effects. We're going to talk about that 43 sprocket that you guys love putting on these things. And then on the next video, it'll be RS-V4 versus Tuono V4 time. Okay, so I think the stock chain actually is 112 link. We have the axle set up all the way back, and then we're going to pull it forward, obviously install the chain, and we're going to have more than enough room to make adjustments for the chain tension. We're not worried about that. What we want to make sure is obviously where we want to set the wheelbase. I'm going to get to it, but so I believe this is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're missing, I'm bad at math. I believe we added 4 more links in the original one, so this is at 116 links right now. Let's measure it, because earlier we measured, and I don't think it's fair that we measured the stock chain that's longer. It's still longer, but so this is 4.10 pounds. And I'm going to stick that stock chain again. And this is at 4.86 pounds. Okay, so we weighed the chain, we weighed the stock chain after we made the adjustments. The 520 chain we're putting on still is a little longer than the stock chain. And it's not really apples to apples, but again, it's not going to make a big difference. And I'm saying this because in the beginning of the video, I said 2 to 3 pounds of savings. I may have been a little too happy with that number. But again, when we change those chains on the BMWs, on the Ducatis, when we go from a 525, which this is, to a 520, which this will be, it ends up being 2 to 3 pounds. In terms of the Aprilia, it's almost just 1 pound, which is very surprising. Even that this sprocket is not an aluminum sprocket. An aluminum sprocket is not going to make a pound of difference. So that's a good thing, because your stock setup is pretty light, but a pound of savings in the driveline still is a considerable amount of weight, because this is the driveline, so it's rotational mass. What does it do? Number one, it takes off the gyroscopic effect that the weight will have because of spinning. Number two, it optimizes the power to the rear wheel, right? This bike makes X amount of power at the crank. By the time that power gets through the gearbox, through the sprocket, to the rear wheel, and to the ground, you lose some weight. That's why when we do dynos, we look at the rear wheel horsepower. There's no real way of measuring the engine horsepower unless you take it off and put it on an engine dyno. But let's not get off on a tangent. Let me get this chain on the bike, and then we're going to talk about the wheelbase and that 43.2 sprocket that all the Tuono riders love. The chain is on. I think it's looking pretty. It's black gold. If you watched the wheel episode, we told you guys that we don't want too much color to the back of the bike because of the color scheme of the ultra gold. I love it. Her mom behind the camera wanted a gold chain. I don't know, maybe we'll put one around his neck. But let's spin this thing and let's show you how freely this spins. And this is going to bring me to a little story that I have at MotoGP that I attended 2-3 years ago. I go every year to Austin, Texas. If I get a chance, I'll go abroad. Hasn't happened for a while, but Austin, Texas happens every year. If you watch our other sprocket and chain videos, I've also mentioned this. I was seeing that the teams are throwing out the chains every session and sometimes once every day. And I grabbed one of the head engineers of the teams and I asked them, why do you guys rip the chain out and run a brand new chain? Is it a safety thing? And their response was, no, it's not a safety thing, but the riders feel the difference between a brand new chain versus a used chain. They feel it to the point that they have to adjust the traction control. So it made me realize how important the chain is in terms of power delivery to the rear wheel. So in this case, obviously you're not going to change your chain every time you ride, but make sure you keep that chain lubed up and clean so that you optimize the power to the rear wheel. And also running a quality chain like an EK3D or a DID ERV7 chain will make sure that you optimize those gains. On top of it, we lose some weight, probably has a big impact. Do we feel it on the road? No. Does it look great? Yes. Why do we buy these machines? Because for their technical superiority. Obviously from the factory there's some things they got to consider about cost, so they don't throw everything at it that they can, and when they do, the bikes cost $100,000 like these special editions that they release. So in this case, I think we put some of the top of the line stuff that the bike deserves. It's looking great. We were talking about the wheelbase of the bike in the beginning of the video, so let's talk about the wheelbase. If you realize we added a couple links, I think 4 or 6 links to this bike. I'm going to count after. Too much stuff going on today, so I can't remember what exactly the count was, but it's between 4 and 6 links that it's actually noticeable. Take a look at how much this axle is pulled back. I don't do drag racing, I don't do roll racing, I don't judge you guys if you do, but you probably see all the roll racing bikes pull the axle all the way back. Even at times they lengthen their swing arms. But if you're not roll racing, people still deal with the wheelbase of the bike, right? So what is the wheelbase? It's the distance between the rear axle and the front axle. That's your wheelbase. What does that do? A shorter wheelbase bike will be more responsive to your steering inputs, meaning that it'll be more agile from transitioning corners, whereas the longer wheelbase bike will be more stable and also it'll be faster through long corners. In this case, back in the 80s and 90s when the bikes started making more power, they were getting a lot of head shake and the steering damper technology wasn't exactly there. So what they did was automatically lengthen the wheelbase to give that bike the stability that it needs. Obviously, if you watch motorcycle racing, you know how important the setup is, but a setup that suits the rider. So for example, Nicky Hayden loves short wheelbase bikes, and in some cases, since they have the adjustment capability of the engine, they'll move the engine up for Nicky so that his bike was even more agile in terms of slow corners, because it gave that tippiness to the bike that he wanted, as opposed to Jorge Lorenzo preferred bikes that have a longer wheelbase, and I guess he enjoyed the stability of it, but what he was saying is he could find the limits without risking a lot on the bike. So that goes to show you it's a personal thing, but these are all the adjustments that you could do on your motorcycle. In this case, we have it set up as a long wheelbase setup in this bike without adding any extensions to our swing arms. That's not the look we go for. Not judging anybody, but this will make this bike, number one, it'll make it more friendly to someone who's not used to a bike like this. Number two, it makes it a little more carefree to ride. Obviously you have to be there, but the bike's not going to wheelie more. And talking about the wheelie, let's get to that 43.2 sprocket that I mentioned. I want you guys to comment, especially you guys who ride the Tuono. Everybody swears by that 43.23 sprocket because you say the bike becomes more fun with that sprocket. And from what I think, people forget it's a two-way thing, right? Sure, the sprocket will make it more fun. It's adding more torque to the bike with the gearing, but one tooth is not going to make that much of a difference. Since most people do not adjust the wheelbase when they do this, all they do is adjust the chain tension. And when you put a 43.2 sprocket, it's a larger diameter. This wheel will get pulled forward with the same chain tension. It makes it a shorter wheelbase. That's why I think automatically that added little bit of torque, 42 to 43 is not going to make a big difference, I think. But the wheelbase is, I think, where the biggest difference is made, where people find the bike more happy and probably wants to lift up that front wheel more. Now that we covered those topics, I want to mention to you guys that all of the products that we use on our videos is in the link in the description below, including on today's video, we'll use some tools like our chain tools. They'll be in the link below as well. And I want to hear your comments. What do you think? What do you like? Tell me about that 43.2 sprocket. But next time you see this bike, it'll be ridden by me and my good buddy. We're going to compare it to an RS V4 and give you guys our thoughts. Until then, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Until next time, guys, have a good one.